sin más preámbulo, le damos la bienvenida a Julia.
Fine, so you'd like me to start?
Yes. Thank you so much, Julia, for being here.
No, it's lovely. It's it's always a strange experience speaking to an unseen audience.
The stage is yours.
Yeah, okay, fine. So, hello everyone. I called my presentation Principles and Mechanisms for Designing Inclusively and Collaboratively. But before I start, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to speak to an audience on the other side of the world. Although I can't see you all, I'm sitting in my house on the mountains behind Kyoto, where it's now nighttime and the autumn leaves are carpeting the ground. Since 2014 and its inauguration as a design incubator at the Kyoto Institute of Technology, I've been at Kyoto Design Lab. But over the past 3 decades, I've been active in 3 different educational arenas, and I'd like to share insights from my experience in the 3. Firstly, the museum world, working mainly with visually impaired people and museum collections in Japan in the 1990s, finding new ways to enable this excluded population to engage with artworks and artifacts which they could neither see nor touch. Then from 2000 in the design world, both at the student and professional level, nationally and internationally, but based at the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design at the Royal College of Art in London, an art and design school environment, so quite different. And finally, from 2014, within a formal Japanese National University setting at Kyoto Design Lab, where my focus has been primarily on interdisciplinary design-led projects involving science, in particular materials and fiber science, applied biology and technology, like this collaboration between Asa Ashwak, the Department of Bio-Based Materials and Molecular Biology, and here we investigated whether the growth patterns of bamboo can be harnessed digitally to enable the optimization of materials and structure in the design of products and architecture. And how could these new digitally optimized structures take into account the technical limitations and opportunities of 3D printing technologies? So each of these arenas has presented a very different set of challenges, but my approach has always been underpinned by my belief, firstly, in the importance of inclusive design, and secondly, my background in sculpture, which was the reason I came to Japan in the first place as a graduate student. Sculpture imbued me with a love and respect for making and materials, like this project with Bosnian designer Natasha Perkovic, where we tried to find ways of creating a design material in different iterations from oil palm waste. But my fine art background has also given me the tendency not to do things according to a fixed set of rules or theories, but rather to play around, experiment and trial things, and then interrogate why they worked or did not work. And of course, failure has been my biggest teacher. My old boss, Roger Coleman, who founded the Helen Hamlin Centre for Design at the RCA in 1999, and who came up with the term inclusive design, used to call this process theorizing practice. And I think that's an excellent description, but it does mean that I have no formal educational theories to offer you, but rather a set of principles which have guided my educational and design methods, irrespective of the particular context, stage of my career, or the projects that I've been involved with. Now, inclusive design stresses the importance of understanding the context, the human one and otherwise, the physical environment, the information environment, the particular cultural, political, or social factors, as well as the economic ones that will determine how one frames the design intervention, in this case in Shanghai, at a dormitory for Chinese itinerant construction workers. In their cashless society, it was essential to use materials that cost nothing and could be scavenged from the construction site to fabricate a self-powered washing machine that would ease their lives. And then there are the set of factors that influence the way in which people have difficulty in using products, services, information, like merit. This 84-year-old Norwegian lady who did not want to use the mobile phone her children had bought for her. In her mind, a telephonic transaction was a linear set of physical interactions with a device that was primarily mechanical, but which could be accomplished even if one had no understanding of the science of telephony. A mobile phone is conceptually quite different as a product. Its phone function is just one of a multitude of other interactions with abstract services, each with its own set of rules and access procedures. So it exists in a completely different conceptual world from a landline phone, even though we call it one. This project was for a 24-hour inclusive design challenge in Oslo that I ran in 2008. The design team cleverly understood that if they framed Marit's way of interaction with this mysterious device in a way that tied in with her understanding of how one writes a message, views an image, and makes a call, she would perhaps gain confidence. Now, this was 2 years before Apple launched its iPad in 2010, and so their design concept predated that. They called it Chalk, and it was built on the principle that one docked the phone but interacted with the screen as one would with a blackboard. And this would alert you visually to messages, calls, and so on, which is great also if your hearing is poor. And then the second thing is that there's the mismatch between design aspiration and user reality. A fundamental principle is that people never read user manuals for a product. Like the people who installed these air conditioners at a hospital in the town that I lived in the UK. Instead, they will subvert and improvise their own solutions, which are often the source of really interesting new ideas, like these 3 taxi drivers in different places who've improvised solutions for mobile phone storage, for tissue dispensing, while the third has designed his workspace according to the order in which he uses his different devices. All of this is vital information for the designer. So the second principle is always document things visually so that you understand the mismatch between how people say they use things and how they actually do. And when they improvise, look really, really closely. For collaborative projects, contextual understanding also means accepting that each discipline has a different language and understanding of the design or ideation process, and advances ideas in a characteristic way. This may be at odds with the methods adopted by their project partner from a different discipline. So how does one accommodate that reality in the design of the mechanism that you're using to ensure good information sharing and communication between the different collaborating partners? Design process diagrams tend to see the design process as a seamless advance from one stage to the other. But I think this diagram by Elizabeth Sanders and Stappers of a participatory design process, particularly the ideation front end, is closer to the truth. And if you want a visual analogy that perhaps one should see it, then perhaps one should see it as a boat race where all are in communication at all times, even though one party may be leading, and depending on the stage. Rather than a relay race where each partner does his specialist bit before passing the baton to the next runner. Like the game of Chinese whispers, where you whisper a word to your neighbor, and by the time everyone has done that, the final word bears no relationship to the original one whispered. So for linear design processes like that, there's always great scope for incremental error, which can be fatal in healthcare environments, as Professor Lucian Leap has observed. Human beings make mistakes because the systems, tasks, and processes they work in are poorly designed. That's not to say that the UK Design Council's double diamond is incorrect, rather that it serves as a guide to the essential elements of a good design process. The other thing about understanding the context is that in collaborative projects, One has to understand the assets and disadvantages and how each can be either enhanced or compensated for by design interventions. It's doing what the Japanese call nemawashi, in other words, securing the roots, doing a proper contextual investigation, talking to everyone who'll be involved and finding out their point of view before framing the brief, designing the mechanism of delivery, and building a collaborative team. And that should happen before any design work begins. This has been central to the projects I've done in the challenging environments in countries of the former Yugoslavia. There I was working with designers and disabled or marginalized groups in social enterprises, schools, or sheltered workshops run by, employing, or training disabled people. Like this one in Skopje in Macedonia. It was centered in a vocational school for deaf students, which once had students from across Yugoslavia, but was now almost a ghost ship. The students were being trained as carpenters, IT technicians, and to work in textiles. I'll show you the results of the former. This was the wood workshop that lacked even basic hand tools. The students, staff, and designers decided there was little point in producing new products. Instead, they decided to make their own tools. Plans were found online. Carpenters brought in to instruct designers and students, and a set of tools that could be used to make more tools produced, along with color-coded instruction manuals, with a working bench to store them in. It demonstrated also to the designers that sometimes what the context needs is a reframing of what already exists and a generative vision of how that can be translated into a real business model. Similarly, oh dear, my presentation has frozen. Oh, right. Similarly, in the interdisciplinary ones that I'm doing now at the Kyoto Institute of Technology, nemawashi or talking has been the key. This one, for example, where I paired a designer with an insectologist. And sorry, my presentation has frozen and I'm just opening the PDF version. Okay. Can you see the screen? Can everybody see my screen? Francesca, my presentation has frozen. I'm going to...
Yes, we only can see you right now.
Right, I'll share the screen again and hope that I can get this presentation back. Can you see my screen at all?
No, not yet.
Right, can you see it now?
No, we just see you.
Oh God, right, okay. Oh my.
There's time, Julia, don't worry.
No, can you see this?
Maybe
No.
you can continue with your talk.
No, it needs, here we are. Let's see if I can.
Okay.
Okay, can you see now?
No, only you.
Why am I not sharing? Share my screen, my entire screen. Here we are. Share.
give us a second. We're gonna try to help you. We also have
I don't have my PDF of my presentation, unfortunately.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. We get it. We're gonna resolve it.
This you cannot see at all.
Not yet. But don't worry, Julia. We're gonna fix it for you.
Oh, dear.
That's how it works. It's part of the...
No, it's part of the excitement of the...
Yeah, don't worry.
Here we go. Right, okay. You can't... This... Can you see that? No.
No, not yet. But we're also working on it. Give us 1 minute. You have to press screen share. Are you doing that?
Hang on a minute. Let me see. Screen share. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Share my screen. Share it. Okay. Right. Let's see if this works.
There it is. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
Good. Okay. Fine. So I'm sorry. So I'm talking about the interdisciplinary ones. This is where I paired a designer with an insectologist and a mathematician. And Henrik, the designer, used the behavior of social insects like ants as a blueprint to develop new algorithms for car navigation and traffic control. The project's focus was the near future introduction of connected and driverless vehicles in Japan. And we framed it within issues of senior mobility in rapidly aging and depopulating rural and suburban areas. But so after intense conversations and discussion between all the parties, this topic was selected from 2 others and the brief framed before any design work took place. It was then interrogated by a group of people living in a similar depopulating community. And then the autonomous car sharing system was designed. So the next principle really is to put time into interrogating what the brief should actually be. I thought perhaps the best approach for this presentation would be to give case studies from each area to illustrate the particular design strategy or mechanism developed and the overriding design question that needed to be addressed. So in my first area of the museum world, what was the design challenge? Well, it was really addressing the mismatch between the physical accessibility of the building and the cognitive accessibility of the exhibits for everyone, irrespective of the type. So the strategy I adopted was to work from the starting point that if you looked at the situation from the point of view of the most excluded visitors, namely visually impaired ones, that this would give you insight into the needs of mainstream visitors. Like the majority of museum visitors, this visually impaired group that I worked with over 3 years were exactly the same as the majority of sighted visitors. When they had been able to see, they were not visually literate and had little in understanding of the basic concepts of art. Neither were they tactilely literate and couldn't read Braille. So the challenge was to develop materials that would enable them to enter imaginatively the art works that they could neither see nor touch, because the vast majority of works in any collection are 2-dimensional, not 3-dimensional, and the 3D ones you cannot touch for conservational reasons. So what was the mechanism? Well, the mechanism I used over 3 years was the organization of a monthly visit to an exhibition for which I would produce raised image reproductions. I'd provide additional tactile props and structure the interpretation according to their information needs. Alongside that, I ran creative workshops that introduced them to the basic concepts of art and making. This is Takayuki Mitsushima, who's blind, And it's him in 1995 at one of those workshops creating a painting using yarn for line. In 2015, I ran a sound design workshop at Kyoto Design Lab with sound artist Yuri Suzuki, where we were mapping the soundscape of Kyoto, which is built on a grid system. Mitsushima introduced the designers to his different sensory world, where sound is a key information deliverer. I commissioned him to do a piece of work centered on his favorite Kyoto grid soundscape and to express it. This is the resulting work. The experience of working with people with disabilities has been a core principle of everything I've done ever since, particularly in my work at the RCA, and expresses the profound creative advantages of working with disability in design. Because I really believe that by understanding the extreme, one can innovate for the mainstream. You can't do it the other way around. You can't innovate by going from a mainstream position and out to the extreme. Now, when I joined the newly formed Helen Hamlin Center for Design in 2000, I was asked by Roger Coleman to work primarily with the professional design community. What was the design challenge? Well, it was how to illustrate that the insights and creative solving skills of disabled people could enable designers to innovate and design more inclusively. And the second was, how could we bring together function and aesthetics so that the products on which they depended could be a source of pride, not shame, and also affordable. It was a time when inclusive design was not yet familiar as a concept or process, but due to legislation in the form of the Disability Discrimination Act in 1995, UK designers realized that they had to be up to speed if they were to win projects, particularly from the public sector. So I contacted the Design Business Association, the main organization for designers in the UK, and asked not for money, but for their support in networking terms. And it's here that the quid pro quo factor comes in. In order to motivate, there has to be a balance of self-interest. Both the DBA and designers understood that they would gain essential skills and understanding of a design process they needed to engage with in order to gain work. So what were the mechanisms developed? So the mechanism I developed was framed around the typical 5-month span of any design project. It was called the DBA Inclusive Design Challenge, and it came in the form of a competition for which there was no monetary prize, just the profile that association with the RCA brought, and the fact that they had a model inclusive design project that was not bound by non-disclosure, that they could use and show to win business, and this in fact happened. This brought sponsors with it and also encouraged smaller firms to take part. In fact, it was a disguised intensive tutorial in inclusive design methods that was directly transferable to their practice. An open brief would be set, often around a theme. I would then organize a project-specific user forums and mentor the designers throughout. And at the end of 5 months, we had a presentation evening at the RCA where the projects were shown in both prototype form and in a 4-minute video with invited keynote speakers. So the Helen Hamlin Center gained every year professionally produced videos of inclusive design as it manifested itself in different disciplines, which we could then use to further spread the word about inclusive design and show what we meant by what we were talking about. At that time, the Helen Hamlin Center also organized a biannual international design conference. And so in 2005, we decided to see what would happen if the designers were given 24 hours only to come up with a visualized concept. So I telescoped the process and made sure that the teams were matched with stimulating design partners with disabilities who would give them a hard time. It was a great success and led to many requests from around the world to do the same, but over a 48-hour period rather than just 24 hours due to language issues. And so over the 14-year period I was at the RCA, 700 designers in 20 countries, 20 cities in 12 countries around the world took part in these challenges. I organized them often in partnership with universities or organizations. Sometimes they took the form of immersive design workshops of 3 to 5 days centered on a particular theme, like this one organized for Arthritis Care, a charity in the UK. It looked at the big issues of stylish footwear for women living with arthritis. How could they live a life where they were not doomed to wear trainers all the time? So what was the challenge in educational terms? Well, in 2018, the UK Design Council brought out a report which analysed the state and impact of the UK's design economy. 64% of the workforce in the design sector are under the age of 45, with graphic design having the highest proportion at 73.8%. So the design industry is an industry of youth, and age and disability are two quite scary topics for many young designers. They fear that they'll have to compromise creatively and see disability as primarily an age-related thing. So it was important first to detach disability from age and then reposition both, particularly in the area of communication design, where the subject of age, for example, is dealt with often by ridiculous stereotyping. Yes, she is of a certain age, but the wrinkled socks, slippers, shawl, bowl of soup, and apprehensive look are indicative of the designer's attitude to age more than anything. So how to overcome such stereotyping was the subject of a project we did at the Helen Hamlin Centre, and the designer Joe Taylor came up with the concept of the yo-yo to describe the mismatch between the physical age of anyone in comparison to how they perceive themselves. In other words, that one can be old and young simultaneously, and that the age in one's head is often very different from your actual physical age. But for the physical age, one needs the added functionality. Here are two classic yo-yos, Madonna and the Rolling Stones. So apart from this conceptual repositioning, one also had to stress the business case for this huge market of consumers. Alessandro Coda of Fiat expressed this beautifully when he said, "A young man will never buy an old man's car, and neither will an old man buy an old man's car." So this dichotomy, I think, represents the big challenge for designers who want to design inclusively. Style plus added functionality are absolutely required. And similarly with disability, I repositioned this by stressing firstly its role in innovation history, particularly in relation to communication-related products or services that we absolutely take for granted, like texting or speech recognition, or even the first concept of a typewriter back at the beginning of the 19th century. And secondly, the creative advantages of working with disabled people, particularly those with severe disabilities, to generate lateral scenarios that would spur creative thinking and to take them out of their comfort zone, which I think is really important for fresh thinking. Like this project, for example, where the focus was the redesign of a Band-Aid. As with all the projects I selected a range of inspiring people with different disabilities for the designers to interact with. Colette has severe arthritis, Peter is blind, and Tom has no arms and uses his feet for everything. The design question he posed was, how do you put on a Band-Aid when you have no arms? Which is a really interesting one, and it's quite different to the one posed by Colette or Peter. But it was a way of ensuring that the designers looked at the subject from different points of view, but could decide on a final inclusive consensus of what worked for all. Now, 30% of the student population at the RCA is dyslexic, which reflects the reality in the wider creative community. So this very direct form of user engagement is crucial. Many of the design partners we worked with were contemporaries of the designers, which bred empathy and underscored the importance of separating the disability from the person. It was not a them and us type of situation. They could understand this dual scenario of disability and lifestyle, and that both were just as important as the other. So in the final part of my educational journey, I've been at Kyoto Design Lab, doing interdisciplinary collaborative projects. Design Lab was inaugurated in 2014, and I was basically given a blank sheet to do something. And in true inclusive form, I interrogated the context, its strengths and drawbacks, decided to focus on the former, and set about building a collaborative team. The first thing that I noticed was that the university's name in Japanese was different to its English name. In Japanese, the Kyoto Institute of Technology is the Kyoto Craft and Fiber University. And this goes back to its roots in the Meiji period, when two schools were created, the first to support the textile industry of Kyoto, and the second, the craft industry. And I think this accounted for the university's deep expertise in life sciences, applied biology, and fiber science and technology. But curiously, although the university has a design and architecture school, there was no textiles department, only a textiles engineering department. This meant that it had a high potential for interdisciplinary collaboration, that D-Lab as an independent entity could play the role as honest broker to curate, facilitate, and deliver. So I centered the program around three themes: making and materials, designing social interactions, and critical curation and interpretation. And the latter was because we have a museum and archives and also a gallery in Tokyo. And I created three mechanisms: an open workshop program, a design associate program, and a designer in residence program. The open workshop program aimed to establish relationships with other universities, investigate the themes that were not part of the curriculum, and also demonstrate a much more interactive form of design education than the Japanese version. They were advertised and open to participants from everywhere, and they also acted as an accelerator often for the initial stage of the design associate program. This saw a young designer invited for 6 months, whom I would link to a research team at the university. Now, KIT has a Drosophila Genetic Resource Center. Now, the fruit fly is to a biologist what rapid prototyping is to a designer. It shares many of our genes and is easy to breed with specific characteristics, so perfect for scientific prototyping. I invited the young Dutch designer Frank Koltman on the left to work with Professor Yamaguchi, next to him, of the Department of Applied Biology. Yamaguchi-sensei is developing a genetic map for a rare degenerative condition called CMT. It's incurable, and it's a neurodegenerative disorder, which means that no cure has been found at all. So now drug discovery is a lengthy, expensive process involving complex interplays between industry, academia, investors, jurisdiction, and marketing. Where no significant commercial benefits can be expected, patients with rare or complex conditions can feel powerless to change the status quo. But what if they could participate in their own pharmacological research at home and find potential cures? And that became the design question. Design for Flies proposed a personalized drug screening system for CMT patients using Drosophila. After feeding personalized transgenic Drosophila melanogaster fruit flies with random chemical compounds, the domestic device screens their behavior to discern any therapeutic effects, with the results captured via webcam and the data shared with the research community on a dedicated cloud server. The project won a Dutch Design Award the following year, and in 2017, Frank was named Dutch Young Designer of the Year. His project, along with all the other Design Associate and Designer in Residence collaborations, can be seen on our website in video. Please have a look. And in conclusion, this is an advertisement. If you're in Tokyo between now and December, do come and see my latest project, Alternative Futures, an exhibition of contemporary design responses to the 300-year silk crepe Chirimen tradition, which is in real danger of disappearing. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Julia, for your talk. So interesting. Bueno, ahora tenemos unos minutos para contestar preguntas de los asistentes y hemos elegido algunas que nos escribieron en el chat durante la presentación de Julia. Julia, the first question.
Yeah.
Do you think that participation in projects like the ones you showed us improves the learning process of students?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I mentioned briefly in my presentation that so many students are dyslexic. In other words, that you cannot provide textual information. And I think that the other thing that that was very apparent when I was working with professional designers is that they often felt that the information that they were given in the form of, which often came through the marketing division of a company, was neither inspiring, it was not really addressing the real problem that they perceived. And so they felt that actual direct interaction with the context and, you know, this group of really inspiring users was very important.
Awesome. Do you think that the will to innovate can be taught, and how can it be done?
I don't know if it's I'm not sure if you can call it a will to innovate. I mean, it's about being curious. I think curiosity is the most important aspect of innovation, you know, to be curious, and also to, how do you say, not be afraid of making mistakes. You know, just make mistakes and learn from mistakes, and don't be how do you say, afraid of them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you for your lovely presentation.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.